Wondering what the F has happened to your body and your life? You're in the right place, my friend. Welcome to Season 3 of Transforming 45, where we dive into the incredible stories of how brilliant humans are navigating the midlife squeeze with courage, passion, and a healthy dose of humor. Don't miss out on any of our heart-led episodes. Hit the subscribe button, leave a 5-star review, and if you're inspired, share an episode you love with a friend. It means more to me than I can express that you're choosing to spend time here and sharing our message of midlife revolution. So let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. This week, for those of you who are watching, it's going to be spicy. You've got two redheads here. So it's going to be a conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. So this week, I am thrilled to welcome Deb Krier to the show. She is an entrepreneur, cancer advocate, and the visionary behind Trying Not to Die.live. With a background in communications, marketing, and public relations, she's navigated diverse roles, from spearheading communication strategies for large corporations, small companies, and nonprofit organizations, to founding her own marketing agency over 20 years ago. Diagnosed with stage 4 triple positive breast cancer in 2015 and thyroid cancer in 2023, she founded Trying Not to Die.live in 2022. As a dynamic advocate and speaker, Deb passionately champions resilience, empowerment, and community building amid adversity, inspiring others to navigate the complexities of cancer with courage and power. For the listeners of my show, they know that cancer is very close to my heart for reasons that I wish it wasn't. So, Deb, I'm so glad that you are here. Welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh. And not only is it two redheads, it's two blue-eyed redheads, right?
No, I am very brown-eyed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are the unicorns of the world because red hair is a very much recessive gene. So yeah, look out, world.
I know, here we come. Also, I have to say my red hair is not genetic. I'm brown head. I have brown hair genetically, but I always, when I was growing up, my favorite book was, the series, my favorite author was Lucy Maud Montgomery, who wrote the Anne of Green Gables series. And I was obsessed with having red hair. And it took me until I was 42 to decide I was going to have red hair. And now everybody just thinks that I was.
It looks very good. Mine is what we call enhanced.
Yes.
But I am a natural redhead. But yeah, years ago, somebody asked, do you dye your hair? And before I could say anything, my husband said, she enhances it.
I love that.
See? Yep. That's why he's a keeper.
Yeah, definitely. That you want someone like that in your corner. All right. So Deb, tell us, who are you and how did life introduce you to this version?
Oh my gosh. I am wild and crazy. It's funny. People are like, oh, you're always so upbeat. You're always, and I'm always chatty Cathy, which that's much to the dismay often of my doctors. But, I'm always like this. I have always been like this. My report cards would always say, will not shut up.
Yes,
because I was
teacher speak, of course.
Pick me. Yes. Oh no, this is long enough ago that they could say, "Will not shut up." And but yeah, I've just always been like this. I'm an only child, so I don't know. Maybe I'm just always, have been talking to myself or trying for attention or whatever. But yeah, this is the way I've always been. But yeah, got knocked for a loop. Back in 2015. When they, the initial diagnosis was stage 0 cancer, which meant not to worry. We're just going to kind of watch it. And then, things kind of trickled through. And many years ago, I worked for an oncologist and for the American Cancer Society. So I know just enough to be dangerous. But, it was one of these things where when we got the final diagnosis after quite a few months of a variety of things, it was stage 4 cancer. And so that was like, and then I had complications because I'm special. If it could go wrong, it did. But, it was just like, okay, now we're just going to pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off and away we go.
Mm-hmm. And so you had mentioned that you have always been sort of like fully present to
Mhm,
yourself
mhm,
and in your body. At least that's what I was hearing from your
mhm,
story.
mhm.
And another thing we have in common, I'm also an only child.
See? Yep,
Yes,
yep. Sisters from another mother.
definitely. How did that experience of coming face to face with your own mortality
Mhm,
so clearly, how did that impact how you evolved in
mhm.
the way that you show up in yourself and in the
Mhm.
world?
Yeah. Well, I tell you, when I got the diagnosis, I was pissed. You know,
Yeah.
and I literally told my doctor, "I'm sorry, I don't have time for this," which made her look at me like, "Really?" You know, and I was like, "Ugh," you know, but definitely when things went south and it got to be very critical, there was actually a time where my doctors were arguing over how quickly I was going to die that day.
Mhm.
You know, you know, and there were several other times where my husband was told, "We're just not sure." But it made me really think about what was going to be next. You know, I was diagnosed in my face, and so you know, you like to think you're kind of halfway through, right? You know, I have a lot of female relatives, but a male also who lived well into their 90s. So that was kind of always my thought process. But it was okay. What do I need to do? And not talking about the treatment or things like that, but it was definitely surround myself with supportive people, those who were toxic. And I say that in this realm here in the United States of presidential election, you know, and just, you know, the people who are always the negative people. They might have to be in your life for whatever reason. Sometimes you're related to them, but you know, get rid of those people. But it was very much, let's not put stuff off. You know, the bucket list type of things. No, let's do those sooner rather than later. And I also, you know, tell people more about, you know, I really try and make sure I say thank you. But more importantly, I tell people I love them. It kind of
Mhm.
startles them every once in a while, but you know, it's only when I mean it, right? It's not just like the guys love you, dude, right? It is more, you know, thank you, and you know, and you hug more. That's what I hated about COVID, no hugging. And
Mhm.
but it was, you know, we only have this life, so how are we going to live it? Especially when your expiration date might have just got moved up.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious now, after everything you've been through, when you look back at your response of, I don't have time for this, one, has your perspective changed around that?
Oh,
And
I still don't have time for this. You know, and it still just annoys me
yeah,
because physically things have changed. What happened with the first big catastrophe was I went into septic shock. And that stat is not good. About
yeah,
75%, it is fatal. And obviously, I fought it off. I've had sepsis again. I've had some pretty major infections, all sorts of things like that. And because of the septic shock, that always will stay with me. It very severely damaged my kidneys. It's been a month ago, had my fifth surgery on my kidneys, and I'm actually still on treatment. I had treatment yesterday. So that slows me down. That annoys me. I'm like, ugh. But again, you just keep going. And I'll tell you, about the point when I start really having a good pity party, which is healthy and is
I
natural,
know.
folks. But you know, about that point, that's when we'll see someone who has had an amputation or someone who is talking about a child being very severely ill or worse, passing away. And I think, oh, honey, you got nothing to be whining about. But yeah, I mean, there are times where it is still just annoyed.
Mm.
You know, you know, the red hair does have that temper sometimes that goes along with it.
Yeah, even when it's not real,
It
that is
does. Yeah.
true.
You can
Mhm.
embrace that.
Yeah, there's like four questions that are trying to come out of my mouth all at
That's
the
all
same
right.
time, which often happens. So I just am filtering through to pick out the one. When it comes to that sort of annoyance,
Mhm,
there's elements of grief in that
mhm, mhm,
because we are living and suddenly we are in a vessel
mhm,
that doesn't function in the way that
mhm.
we are
Right.
used to,
Mhm,
right? Yeah. So, what do you do in those moments? Because as you mentioned, it is really important to acknowledge that,
Mm,
right? We
right.
all have what was I recently watching? Oh, The Good Place. I haven't
Mm,
watched The Good
mhm,
Place. And Kristen Bell's character talked about how humans are always a little bit sad because we know the ending of our story is death.
mhm,
And so it impacts our daily experience
mhm.
and our daily lives. And I hadn't really thought about it that way. But do you see that annoyance as being part of the way that you're processing grief?
Mhm. Yeah, and it's interesting because I think we do go through the stages of grief because our life has changed. Now, it's really funny. I was listening to another podcast, and it was a woman who had lost her husband, and
Mm.
she is a grief counselor now, and she said it is a different type of grief, and it was very interesting because I thought, yeah, I should never compare that grief with that, but we do go through those annoyance, denial, all of those various stages over and over again, just like someone who has lost someone does. I mean, you might be fine for days, weeks, years, and it will
Mhm.
hit.
Yep.
But again, it's important to acknowledge that. But yeah, my life changed. It was, now if my diagnosis had been, the initial one, it wouldn't have changed much. But then when it kept kind of getting worse and getting worse, it was very much that, and thinking, okay, the things that I wanted to do, sometimes I can't, because of the exhaustion, because of the way my body reacts, like some of the stuff I used to eat and love eating, my body goes, no, not so much.
Mm.
And so I can choose. Okay, I can either, and it was funny because one of my doctors told me that. I said, what do I need to do? And he said, eat it. If it makes you sick, don't eat it again. you know, and I'm like, okay. But yeah, it's just you kind of have to realize, okay, I can't push myself as hard as I used to. I need a nap every day. I've turned into a kindergartner. I need my nap and then my
Yeah.
my milk and graham crackers. But acknowledging that too and
Mhm.
letting people around me know, no, I'm done for the day. I remember one time where we had gone grocery shopping and came back and for whatever reason, grocery shopping is really hard on me.
Mhm.
And it still is. I don't know why. And I had literally just gone thud up against the refrigerator and was almost asleep. I mean, it was just, and that's where my husband found me. He's like, hello. But it's annoying when I think, I want to go do that. Oh, I can't. And then thinking, okay, really? Can't I? Or is it just something where I'm thinking I can't? But, so do I push? Do I not? And sometimes it's okay. I can push and do that, knowing for a couple of days I'm going to be, kind of down for the count.
I think it's a theme that comes out of conversations on
Hmm.
this show a lot. And it's when do we decide to be a little bit more gentle with
Hmm.
ourselves,
Hmm.
right? That
Right.
I think I probably shared this story before, but when I was pregnant with my first son, I was still in my first trimester, but it was a day where I was feeling a little bit better. And so I
Hmm.
was like, okay, I'm going to get out in the world and I'm going to do things. And I went out into my
Hmm.
garden. I got maybe 3 or 4 shovels,
Hmm.
dug into the earth, and I just sat down and started crying. And
Oh.
my partner came out and
Hmm.
he said, what is the matter? It's like, I lifted the shovel 3 times and now I'm so tired that I can't even
Hmm.
get up from this spot.
Hmm.
And we, as humans, we do that, right? Like
Hmm.
we try
Right.
to just keep pushing
Hmm.
through
Hmm.
physical needs of our
Hmm.
bodies.
Right. And your
And
body is saying, wait, for a
yes,
reason.
yes, because when we are going through something like healing
Hmm.
in a health
Hmm.
crisis, when we are going through treatment, when we are going through creating a human, whatever
Hmm.
it is that your body is doing,
Hmm.
it takes additional energy
Right.
that often, particularly as women,
Hmm.
we push all that energy
Hmm.
out to other people,
Right. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But in these moments, we need to turn that energy towards ourselves.
Hmm.
And so the question I often ask is, so how do we get to the point where you're able to do that without being in a place of crisis?
It's all about being honest, honest with ourselves. First of all, to accept that having those limitations does not mean there's something wrong with us,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
And then being honest with the people around us and being able to tell them, I'm too tired to do this, or I need to sit down and rest for a while. I need you to shovel for a little bit. Just being honest with them. And that's where it's so important that we have those good relationships. I mean, if you're going to tell somebody, hey, I need help or what, and they're not accepting of that, well then shoo, they need to go away. And it's so cute. I have discovered I definitely have like this group of supporters that I just love dearly, who they watch out for me sometimes more than I do. Do you need to rest? Do you need to, I'm like, I'm okay. I'm okay. But yeah, it's all about being honest with ourselves and with others because nobody reads minds. I look perfectly fine. Could I walk half a mile right now? No.
Uh-huh.
And that's because I did have treatment yesterday. Man, it really just zaps me. But yeah, being able to say, nah, I'll go for a walk tomorrow. And the dogs are like, really? They don't quite understand the whole honesty thing, but it's about being honest with everyone.
And that's so important, especially what you were talking about in terms of having community,
Mhm,
right? This is, although, yes, it's an experience that you are experiencing
mhm,
individually,
mhm.
it's not meant to be held alone,
Right.
right? And having that group of people around you to
Mhm,
support you and be
mhm.
that is such an important element through the work that you do. What is one of the ways that you encourage people or help them to develop that community?
It's interesting because one of the biggest things I hear is I feel so alone.
Yeah.
And part of that is on us, right? We don't tell people we need X because we don't want to be whining. We don't want to be complaining. We don't want to be a bother. And so we're like, no, I'm fine. I hate that word. That's the worst four-letter word, fine.
Uh-huh.
And building your tribe. I'm real big on the fact that I am not a cancer patient. I am a warrior. I'm in the fight for my life. I even have it tattooed on my arm. And it's part of that was because when I first started down this journey, someone sent me a thing and it says to the warrior, you cannot withstand the storm. And the warrior responds, I am the storm.
Uh-huh.
But warriors never ever go into battle alone. They have to have their tribe around them. And it's however you need that. But it is going to include your medical people, whether it's traditional, non-traditional. It includes your friends, your supporters, your family, loved ones, coworkers, whoever you need to be part of that tribe. You need to gather those folks together and they're going to come and go. Everybody's life changes and gets busy. Don't be bent out of shape or get hurt feelings when, some things change, right? Things change with
Uh-huh.
us. But yeah, we need to build that community. Well, I tell people there was one time where I was having surgery. Now, the procedure there a month ago was actually surgical procedure number 34. Lots scars have scars, and so, but one of the times when I was in, I had reached out to my community and so I have a Facebook group. That's how I kind of keep everybody informed about what's going on. But, I had told them all, hey, thoughts and prayers going into surgery, yada, yada, yada. And I felt that bubble around me. But
Uh-huh.
I also very distinctly remember thinking, well, I can't die because they'll all be mad. But yeah, I knew that people were sending thoughts, prayers, well wishes, whatever it was. I was not alone in there.
Hmm. And that's often what gives us the strength,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is
Right.
to when we don't have the strength on our
Mm-hmm.
own.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where there's so many parallels
Mm-hmm.
to the journey that you've been
Mm-hmm.
through, that midlife
Mm-hmm.
transformation
Mm-hmm.
as
Right.
well. When we
Right.
are, everything in our
Mm-hmm.
lives is shifting and
Mm-hmm.
changing in
Right.
lots of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I've described it a lot on this show in terms of the roles we play
Mm-hmm.
versus who we actually
Mm-hmm.
are,
Right.
right? And if that it's that process of transition and
Mm-hmm.
transformation that sort of tears
Mm-hmm.
down all of
Mm-hmm.
the story we've
Right.
written
Right.
about the roles that we play.
Right.
And it exposes us as the truth of
Mm-hmm.
who we really
Right. Right.
And how did that play out for
Hmm.
you during your process?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to give you a shout out because talking about menopause
Mm,
and working with women to get through that is so incredibly important. And it's also one of those things that we don't talk about. We don't tell anybody, because there's so many stigmas that go along with it. Oh, I'm no longer of childbearing years. I
uh-huh.
never had kids. It didn't matter to me. But and the really funny thing is, I didn't know when I went through menopause. I had had a hysterectomy many years ago, but it was just a partial hysterectomy. And so I still had my ovaries, but my body just, and so I never knew. I mean, I was very fortunate that I did not have any of the symptoms. But it is something, just like with cancer, we don't talk about because we don't want people to think we're weak. And I think especially for women, it's so important that we don't want people to think we're weak. We don't want them to think we can't do our job. We can't do whatever it is. And talking about it is what makes it just something that kind of happens. I mean, it doesn't bother us to say I got a cold. Like,
Yes.
I
Yeah. Well, Vance did us a real favor by ripping that
he
Band-Aid off
did.
with
Oh, and he not only he ripped that band-aid off and he picked and carried on, and but yeah, I think that is kind of one of those things is it has to be normalized where we can talk about it and it not be
absolutely.
a problem.
Yeah, and thank you, first of all, thank you for that. And I was referring to, I'm sure you know what I'm referring to, but his
Oh, yes, and I
comment
have
that,
cats, so
yes,
I
well,
am I am the
that one, but
childless cat lady.
and that and that
Hmm.
the purpose of a postmenopausal
Hmm.
woman is to be a grandmother.
Hmm.
And that really, it took all of the stigma
Hmm.
and all of the things that we are
Hmm.
worried about, and he like literally put it into words and
Right.
laid it plain on the
Hmm.
table,
Right.
right?
And
That,
so many people think that, which that is the annoying thing.
yes. The thing that I love about it, however, is that it ripped the lid
Hmm.
off, right? Like
Hmm.
it is such a good example of how when we name things,
Hmm.
it takes their power away
Right.
and allows us to
Hmm.
speak the truth.
Right. Right.
And so that it was a really
Hmm.
beautiful, because I'm in the menopause world,
Hmm.
I often forget actually that people don't talk about it and that it still has stigma around it because
Hmm.
it is in the
Hmm.
ether in
Right.
everything that I do. And so the memes and the power that came
Hmm.
out through
Hmm.
that was so exciting,
Hmm.
right? Like it was
Right.
so
Right.
empowering to
Hmm.
watch. It was exactly the
Hmm.
opposite, I'm sure, of what
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
anticipating.
Right. Well, and when you look at the female leaders,
Yes.
whether it's a CEO or the head of the church, the head of the family, whatever, so many come into their own once they kind of hit that 55-ish age range, right?
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that people just tend to forget is just from an age perspective, people who have a lot of those positions are older. It takes you a while to get there, and so, and of course, there's nothing wrong with being a grandmother. That's the other
No.
thing was,
Yeah.
he kind of made that look bad too.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's like, okay, well, whatever you want to be at whatever age, you should be able to do it without anybody saying,
Yeah, absolutely. It's now your time.
mm-hmm,
You get to make those
mm-hmm,
decisions
mm-hmm,
where we often have been living our lives in service to other
mm-hmm,
people
mm-hmm,
or living out other people's dreams
mm-hmm,
or living out other
mm-hmm,
people's realities that they wish that they had
mm-hmm,
had.
mm-hmm,
And yeah, you get to this point where you finally get to step
mm-hmm,
into your
right,
own skin.
mm-hmm, right,
You've had enough experience, and
mm-hmm,
I do think that there is some polarity
mm-hmm,
or sort of tension that
mm-hmm,
happens, and I'm interested in your perspective in this because yes, we've had this lived reality
mm-hmm,
experience, which means that we likely are like we're coming up on the back end.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And so there is this tension of you become more aware
mm-hmm,
of I don't have all the time in the world.
mm-hmm,
And
right,
so how do I want to, whose quote is it, spend that my one wild and precious life?
mm-hmm, right,
Because it is becoming more and more
mm-hmm,
precious and hopefully a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
and more wild.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I love that. And I think, it's one of those where women, and especially women who have been raising a family, they get to that point where they've shipped them off, and then they're like, well, now what?
Uh-huh.
And I am one of those people. I think that, anytime somebody tells me, oh, I'm just a mother, I'm like, no, no, smack, 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 right? And those who are mother and a breadwinner and, all those, it's whatever works for you. But I think it is a time where a lot of women go, now what? Because
Yeah.
they have
Yeah.
been doing that all important role of raising their family. And then all of a sudden, they're not the carpool driver. They're not going to every soccer game and every band concert. And I think that is the time when they go, okay, now I get to do maybe it's not what you really wanted to do, because for so many, that mother role was their, the ultimate for them. And that's absolutely perfect. But, now they're going, what is the next step? What do I want to be? And sometimes they don't know what that step's going to be.
Yes, which is equal parts exciting and
Mm-hmm.
terrifying.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. It's the space I've been living my life in for the
Mm-hmm.
last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And now the reality of it is here.
Right.
Right. So my children are both headed off. Again, listeners will know,
Mm-hmm.
like my boys are
Mm-hmm.
both headed into their first year
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. So we are becoming instant empty nesters.
Boy,
Yeah. So it is a big
even just grocery
transition.
shopping, you're like,
Oh my gosh.
I don't
It's
have to buy
so
2 gallons of milk or whatever it is.
Yeah, that alone. So we've kind of had a preview because my children both work at a residential summer camp. So they live
Okay.
there. They live there
Okay.
for the summer. So we've
Mm-hmm.
had some like preview of
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
this life is like. Yeah. And getting used to cooking for just two
Mm-hmm.
people again,
Right.
that even just those like simple things
Mm-hmm.
that you wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
really think about. But the
Mm-hmm.
first couple of times I made a meal for just Ken and I, it was like days of
Yeah, now we have
leftovers
leftovers.
because I'm used to having
Mm-hmm.
two teenage boys
Mm-hmm.
who eat
Right.
voraciously.
Right.
Yeah. So it really is down to those like
Mm-hmm.
most sort of basic and fundamental
Mm-hmm.
things that
Mm-hmm.
change. And it is the way I describe it, it's like it is a time of grief and
Mm-hmm.
mourning.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
it is a time
Mm-hmm.
of great liberation
Mm-hmm.
if you are able to position it for
Mm-hmm.
yourself that
Mm-hmm.
way and not get lost in the
Mm-hmm.
grief.
Right.
And then also acknowledging that some people's experiences are totally different. I've
Mm-hmm.
spoken to some women who are just so excited
Mm-hmm.
that this is finally
Right.
their
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
That it's this process of
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that every person's
Mm-hmm.
experience is going to be so very different.
Right, right. And I tell you what, we as women need to support everybody,
Yes.
right?
Uh-huh.
We have absolutely got to say, what can I do to help?
Yes.
Great for everything you're doing. All of those things. We need to support them and say, and acknowledge the grief too. I have a good friend here in Atlanta who, her child just went away to college.
Uh-huh.
And she actually has 4 kids. I mean, this is the first one that's really ventured out of the nest, right?
Yeah.
And I texted her that day and I said, "How are you doing?" And she
Uh-huh.
said, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, "I know today's very hard."
Uh-huh.
And he's only 4 hours away, so it's not a huge thing. But she said, sad and glad. And she said, but nobody seems to think that I should be either. And I'm like, why shouldn't you be?
Yes. Yeah. It's so fascinating to me,
Mm-hmm.
this need that we have to, one, compare,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
then two, sort of have these boxes of
Mm-hmm.
what you should be
Mm-hmm.
feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It was like when my kids graduated from high school and people were like, oh, it's so exciting. That's so amazing. All of those comments made me angry
Mm-hmm.
because only acknowledged half of the story,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
you're
yes,
little babies, right?
no, he's like
Mhm,
tiny humans
mhm.
who just like loved so much and still do. Like,
Right, right.
that's part of the hard part is that when, I've developed these
Mhm,
relationships with
mhm.
these young humans
Right.
now who
Mhm,
are interesting. And I
Mhm.
love being part of
Mhm.
their sort of
Mhm.
everyday. And it's not just that, it's also their friend circle, when
Right.
they've had these friends who have been in their
Mhm.
lives and in our lives over the
Mhm.
course of the last, decade or
Mhm.
so,
Mhm.
you become part of your world
Right.
and
Mhm.
being part of their everyday. And I actually remember that as being one of the really hard things when
Mm.
I graduated from high school and went to
Mhm.
university. It
Right.
was that knowing that all of these people who had been such an important part of my
Mhm.
day to day, and we knew
Mhm.
we were weaving in and out of each
Mhm.
other's stories
Mhm.
every day.
Right.
That was suddenly going to be very different.
Mhm. Right.
And that inherently changes a
Mhm.
relationship.
Mhm. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had friends that I started with kindergarten,
Uh-huh.
and then and we all went to different places. Some got married, some went off to universities, some got jobs. I mean, all these things, but we all scattered.
Yes.
And this was way before Facebook and all of those
Mhm.
various things. And so yeah, there was a grief process there, right? Because they all of a sudden weren't there for you.
Mhm. Yeah, and it doesn't mean that you still love those people, and
Right.
that's where there's that grief
Mm-hmm.
because it's a loss in some ways
Mm-hmm.
of, I still similarly, I grew up in a small town. My
Mm-hmm.
graduating class was 35 people.
I had 32.
There you go. Who all, again, same,
Mm-hmm.
scattered
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
are all doing,
Mm-hmm.
incredible and
Right.
fascinating things.
Mm-hmm.
It was an amazing
Mm-hmm.
group of humans, and I still love them so
Mm-hmm.
deeply. And
Mm-hmm.
when we do see each other, it's
Mm-hmm.
not often, but
Mm-hmm.
when I make the time and we make that connection, it doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
that there have been years
Right.
of not seeing each
Mm-hmm.
other. Those ties
Mm-hmm.
remain
Mm-hmm.
and stay fundamental.
Right. Right.
And I miss knowing
Mm-hmm.
them in the way
Mm-hmm.
that we did during
Right.
that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is that sort of it's the shift in stage of
Mm-hmm.
life.
Right.
And again, which brings us back to this, right? Anytime we go through a shift and change of life, that for the most part, I find the grief lives in the
Mm-hmm.
way it changes
Mm-hmm.
the relationship that we have
Right.
with ourselves
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and with the people around
Mm-hmm.
us.
Right. And it was, of course, a good thing to be going off
Yeah.
and making new friends and all of those things. And one of the, I'll bring us back to the original topic. One of the
Mhm.
things that really surprised me was when I told people, hey, I've got cancer. Some of the people who I thought would be my biggest supporters dropped off the face of the earth. And I don't know. Obviously, the friendship had run its course, and we just, it was just kind of, the Facebook friends type of thing, right?
Mhm.
And it did hurt because it was like, wait a minute. And I don't know if it was that they couldn't deal with it, they couldn't deal with their own mortality or whatever. I remember, I had gone to the doctor by myself and, because this was not supposed to be anything very serious. And so, of course, first thing was, call my husband, then,
Mhm.
then my mother. And then I texted my best friend from kindergarten and she didn't respond. And I thought, oh, it's during the day.
Mhm.
So she's busy, all these things. And, so not that she was ignoring me, she was just busy. And, several hours go by and she still hadn't responded. And so I thought, well, maybe I texted the wrong number, because she had a work phone and a personal phone. No, it's the right number. So then you start getting your feelings hurt, right? And so when it reached later on in that day, when I was really feeling very pitiful,
Mhm.
she texted and she said, I am having trouble with this, but give me a little bit. Then it was
Mhm.
okay. And a little bit later, she did respond. She still lives in Denver. She came out twice and out here to Atlanta and spent time helping take care of me. One of the times when I was having one of my plethora of surgeries and my husband could not take time off from work, she came out and she was the person who took me and did all of those various things. But I think that was, I had to give her that grace also because it was a challenge for her. And I think we need to remember that when we give people those type of news, sometimes they
Mhm.
don't know what to do. Now, the cool thing is people who I didn't even think knew I existed have been some of my biggest supporters. And I think that's
Mhm.
been one of the fun things about it.
Mhm.
And it's not that you're finding out who your true friends are. You're
Yeah.
just finding out who your friends are now.
Yeah.
right?
I think that's a really good way to put it because often when we find ourselves in these situations, not only are we receiving care and
Mhm,
news and treatment that we didn't
mhm,
ask
mhm,
for, but also we become a mirror and
mhm.
we take on roles in other people's lives
Right. Mhm,
that we didn't ask for.
mhm,
It's the reality. And so that is so important to remember that it's not almost always when we tell someone something like that and we watch them sort of fizzle out of our lives,
mhm.
it has nothing to do with us
Right.
and everything to do
Mhm,
with them.
mhm,
And like I can see it sometimes play out in my own relationships with so I've had two friends since my mom passed away from
mhm,
cancer. I've
mm.
had two very close friends who were diagnosed
Oh. Mhm.
and they both are thriving and have done
Yay!
really well. And I had to watch myself through that process
Mhm,
because during my mom's process,
mhm,
every time she had a doctor's appointment, it was bad news.
mm.
Every time. There
Mhm,
was never a moment
mhm,
where there was hope. It was
mhm.
just the story got
Ugh.
worse and worse and worse each
Mhm,
time. And I had to really check myself in my
mhm.
relationship with these other two women.
Right. You were expecting that.
Yes. To know that
Mhm,
they're writing different
mhm,
stories,
mhm,
and it's not my place to
mhm,
insert a story that was
mhm,
coming with me.
mhm,
And so I know sometimes for me that made tension because I didn't want to insert that into
mhm,
into their
mhm,
stories. And so there were times where I would be there and there were times where I needed to like take a
mhm,
little bit more space
mhm,
because of my own
mhm. Right.
stuff that I
Mhm,
was bringing
mhm,
to it.
mhm. Right. And one of the things that people are always telling me is we didn't know what to say. We don't know what to
Mm.
say. And I tell you, Hallmark has cards, and I actually still have all of the cards that people sent.
Yeah.
But they ran the gamut from really funny to very serious types of things. But I also tell people it's okay to say I'm sorry you're going through this.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And but people have said, well, we didn't want to make it worse. We didn't want to talk about that elephant in the room, whatever it was. And it's okay just to say, I'm sorry. But then one of the worst things is to follow up and say, so Lisa, just tell me if there's something I can do.
Yeah.
Because our brains are going, oh my God, I have cancer. I'm having to deal with this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And you mean well when you
Mhm.
say, tell me, but I can't put my head around that. But
Yeah.
if you say, can I drive you to a doctor's appointment?
Yeah.
Can I bring dinner on Thursday? Can I just come and sit with you? All of those things give us something concrete in our little brains to grasp onto. One of the things that and I had fun with this because this is just how I am, right? I was initially in the hospital in and out of ICU for over 7 weeks, and then a couple more big hospital stays, all sorts of stuff. And of course, one of the things the doctor said was, you got to get out, you got to get exercise, you got to get fresh air, sunshine. Well, I was using a walker, and that's how pitiful I was, right? And so I couldn't go by myself because I could very easily go kerplunk.
Yeah.
But my husband had gone back to work, and so I put on Facebook, need people to come walk me 15 minutes a day, leash provided. But that gave people something to say. I can do Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so it was something that again gave them something to focus on, but by me making it funny, they
Yeah.
could deal with it better. If I'd said, nobody wants to be around that,
Right.
even and yet there were, I mean, I had people who came into my hospital room. Now I had lost all my hair. That was really entertaining.
Well,
I started to lose my hair, and I was in the hospital, called my friend who had said, hey, I'll shave it all off. She came and she did that. And so in the morning when the doctors did rounds, I had hair. When they came back that afternoon, I was bald, and they were like, whoa. And so, but yeah, so I was bald. I lost over 50 pounds in the hospital. I had a nasal tube. I was pretty pitiful. And and there were people who would come visit and it would just freak them out. I
yeah.
mean, and they would, the visits would either be really short or they'd go as far away. I had this really big room. When you kind of take up residence, you get these cool big rooms, and they would get as far away from me as they could. But it is, and God bless them for even coming to visit. But yeah, it was just kind of one of those things where I tried to make it as fun as I possibly could,
No.
but I also would fall asleep at the drop of a hat
Yeah.
because I was very ill. So the people who said, "Hey, I'll just come sit with you," yay, bring a book.
Yeah. Yeah, just don't expect me to entertain you while you're here. So with all of that lived experience, you were coming
Mhm.
from a very powerful place for your organization. So tell me a little bit about the work that you are doing with trying not to die, live.
So it's still just an initiative. I
Mhm.
don't know if I'll ever make it a nonprofit because I don't know that I want it to be that big, right?
Yeah.
But we launched it, it's been about 2.5 years ago, and it was my business coach who told me, you need to do this, and we were talking about business stuff. And all of a sudden she says, you didn't go through everything you went through without using it to help others. And I told her, I said, oh, but I don't want to be cancer girl. But I realized what she said was right because when we have those shared experiences, that's how we can help others. And so the
Mhm.
trying not to die part came about because of my mother. Now she, like we said, only children. When my husband called and said, you got to get here and you got to get here now. And I'm not sure it will be soon enough. She came out, she stayed for 4.5 months. That was a little long, right? We packaged her up and sent her away at one point. It was one of the times some medical person had come in my room at the hospital and had left, and then I got the disapproving mother face. And I went,
Mhm.
"What?" And she said, "You did not say thank you." And I said, "Oh, for God's sakes, Mom, I'm trying to not die." When I finally, was coherent enough to think about it more, I did realize that when we have something like this that is happening, cancer, whatever the diagnosis is, even just sometimes life, right? We get so caught up in thinking, I'm trying to not die, that we forget that we have to live, even if it's just 5 hours, right? Whatever it is. But I am a marketing person. So I tried, the website was going to be tryingnotto.com and somebody had it. How rude.
Mhm.
And they offered to sell it to me for way more than I was going to spend. I was like, this is just something in my brain. I'm not going to spend $5,000. And it's funny because I since have purchased that URL. When you buy when you're looking at website domain names, if it is taken, GoDaddy or whoever you're going through
Mhm.
suggests others. And so, of course, it was one of these things where when it suggested trying not to die.live, I went, duh, right? That was
Yeah.
just kind of one of those where it made perfect sense. And of course, we turned live into an acronym, but it was something that, what we do is it is all about helping anyone who is dealing with cancer, whether they have it or they know someone who does, or
Yeah.
there may be medical personnel. How can they help us on that journey? I have probably just as many people who we are working with who are the friends, the family, the loved ones, as opposed to the cancer patient warrior. And so it's, how can you do that? So we've got resources. We have a private Facebook group that's a lot of fun. We really try and keep it upbeat, but there are times where somebody might post the other day posted and said, my husband passed today. So it
Mm.
was a great place
Mhm.
for her to get support.
Yes.
But it is a place where we have ways where you can just kind of help somebody through this, and
Mhm.
always looking for, additional resources, all sorts of things. But because of course, when I was told, hey, you have cancer, I immediately went to Dr. Google and went,
Mhm.
whoa, right? Because there was so
Mhm.
much information. But it's just a great resource for people who are on this journey.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for providing that because it is so important. We've talked about the individual experience and we've talked about the community
Mhm,
experience, and having support and additional resources
mhm,
available for everyone is so important because it is a time when, your nervous system is not
mhm.
regulated,
Right. Mhm,
and having people there to say, this
mhm,
is the information you
mhm.
need at this
Yeah.
point in time and
Mhm,
we're here for you is so
mhm,
important.
mhm. Right.
Thank you so much for doing that work in the
Mhm,
world.
mhm,
And for anyone who is
mhm,
listening, I will make sure that all of that information is in the show notes so you
mhm,
can join the Facebook group
mhm.
and connect with Deb. And thank you for this conversation today. I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. It really is just something where we just need to know we're not in this alone.
Absolutely. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me on this week's episode of Transforming 45. I hope you feel inspired empowered, and ready to embrace every facet of your midlife journey. If you enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. These actions make a world of difference in growing our podcast community. Your support helps us reach much more amazing listeners just like you. And don't forget, please share an episode you love with a friend or with your community. Sharing our stories is what helps our community grow. Keep shining your midlife magic, and I'll catch you next week.